Star Wars is so good!
Get shit-faced.
I don't like sand.
The games are pretty good.
So chief, it's the return of the blade and slice shade, getting paid until my silhouette fades. A mercenary, spit the levy versus scary sage, doing girlies dirty.
Star Wars is a beast of a franchise that goes way beyond just the 7-ish films. I'm talking TV series, books, comics, Christmas specials,
The Panther Rump,
and of course, video games. For years, Lucasarts innovated and made some of the best Star Wars games ever made. So whatever happened to them? George Lucas founded Lucasfilm Games in 1982 to later rename it to Lucasarts in 1990. Throughout the 80s, Atari partnered with Lucasarts on games like Ball Blazer and Rescue and Fractalis. Later on in the decade, games like Labyrinth and Maniac Mansion would serve as the basis for adventure titles like Monkey Island. LucasArts also made a name for themselves in the 90s making simulation games. It was a while before LucasArts actually used the Star Wars license though. Most games released during the 80s were made by other companies because they had the Star Wars license before LucasArts was even formed. Larry Holland and his independent team would go on to develop the X-Wing title, which would be the first game released under LucasArts, which of course spawned its own successful series. With the popularity of Doom, Star Wars The Dark Forces was dropped in 1995, which, according to LucasArts, was in development before Doom, which doesn't exactly surprise me. LucasArts had a big hand in many of the gaming innovations that came out of the 80s and 90s. iMuse, or Interactive Music Streaming Engine, was developed to aid in the synchronization of music to events on the screen, as well as musical transition in games. If this sounds familiar, that's because games like Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64 would use this heavily, and it's commonplace in gaming today. LucasArts was killing it in the 90s. Rogue Squadron, Shadows of the Empire, and the Jedi Knight series all cemented themselves as immediate classics. Then the prequels happened. Metachlorians. In 2000, Jeffrey Simon became the head of LucasArts. And while yes, we still got some great games like the pod racing games, Simon admitted that there was an over-reliance on the Star Wars brand, an issue the company would be faced with throughout the early 2000s. I mean, Grim Fandango was lit, but it wasn't like it was in the 80s and 90s. In 2003, BioWare and LucasArts would collaborate to drop the bombshell that is Knights of the Old Republic. That sophisticated role-playing, beautiful storytelling is lit. In 2004, Jim Ward became president of the company and did a complete audit from top to bottom, calling it quite a mess. Ward proposed a 5-year plan to restructure the company and focus mainly on internal development, instead of focusing on third parties like Obsidian, BioWare, and Raven Software. He reduced staff from about 450 to 190 employees and canceled games like Rogue Squadron Trilogy, which was about halfway through its development cycle. Under Ward's leadership, we saw games like the LEGO Star Wars Trilogy by Telltale and the Force Unleashed games. However, in 2008, that only resulted in more layoffs. By 2010, things weren't looking much better as a third of the employees from LucasArts had been fired. By 2012, we were getting games like Kinect Star Wars, the classics, and while initially promising to let the company operate independently, would eventually switch all development to Disney Interactive Studios. That was until EA signed a multi-year contract to develop Star Wars games. And we all know how that's going. It's really sad to see such an influential developer like LucasArts fall the way that they did. The last game the company published was Star Wars Angry Birds in 2012. The silver lining here is that a lot of developers who worked for LucasArts would go on to found other companies like Telltale, Monkey Fun, and as recently as 2015, Fifth Journey. LucasArts may not be around anymore, but their impact and more importantly, the memories we've made playing their games are eternal. And for that, we pour one out for the fallen homies. So what do you think? Do you think LucasArts was just the result of changing industries, or do you think it was the result of poor management? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, comment, favorite, and subscribe. I'm your boy Mike Dangerous, and this was Talking Shots.